evening. I'm Lonnie Stonich, the Executive Director of FAN, and I'm honored to welcome you to tonight's important conversation between Dr. Yusef Salaam and Professor Reuben Miller. Thank you for attending. FAN's a nonprofit organization that presents a high-quality speaker series offered free to the public on a wide variety of topics, including human development, mental health, education, and social justice, to name a few. We have over 125 videos of past events archived on our website and our YouTube channel, so please be sure to explore. And now formal introductions. Dr. Yusef Salaam is the inspirational speaker and prison reform advocate who, at age 15, was one of the 5 teenage boys wrongly convicted and sentenced to prison in the Central Park jogger case. In 1997, he left prison as an adult to a world he didn't fully recognize or understand. In 2002, the sentences for the Central Park Five were overturned, and all 5 were exonerated for the crime they did not commit. The Exonerated Five have been profiled in award-winning films, including the documentary The Central Park Five from Ken Burns, Sarah Burns, and David McMahon, and most recently, the Emmy Award-winning Netflix limited series When They See Us, written and directed by Ava DuVernay. Dr. Salaam is the co-author with Ibi Zoboi of 2020's award-winning Punching the Air, a powerful YA novel in verse about a boy who is wrongfully incarcerated. His new book, Better Not Bitter, came out on Tuesday. Professor Reuben Miller is an assistant professor at the University of Chicago Crown Family School of Social Work Policy and Practice. His research examines life at the intersections of race, poverty, crime control, and social welfare policy. His new book, Halfway Home, Race, Punishment, and the Afterlife of Mass Incarceration, is based on 15 years of research and practice with currently and formerly incarcerated men, women, their families, partners, and friends. Prior to joining Crown Family School, Professor Miller was an assistant professor of social work at the University of Michigan, where he served as a faculty associate in the Population Studies Center and a faculty affiliate in the Department of Afro-American and African Studies. He was selected as a member in the School of Social Science at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey, the world's leading center for curiosity-driven research. He was also a visiting fellow at Dartmouth University in 2018 and an Eric and Wendy Schmidt National Fellow at the New America Foundation in 2018-19. Let's now welcome Dr. Salaam and Professor Miller.
Hi, everybody. How's everything going? Glad to be here, even though we're here virtually, but this is definitely an honor and a pleasure to be here in front of you.
Absolutely. I echo Dr. Salaam's sentiments. It's just an honor to be with you. And Dr. Salaam, it's just an honor to be with you. I've wanted to meet you for years, and I'm just grateful to spend this time tonight with you. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to just open. I'd like to just get started. If we just get at it, and we're going to talk about this beautiful book, Better Not Bitter, Living on Purpose in the Pursuit of Racial Justice. It's a powerful book, an important book, and the book opens with action. The book opens at the verdict. Guilty, it says. In fact, guilty, they say. And this is after you tell us that you were, quote, rolled over by the spiked wheel of justice. But you say something else. It's how you open. It's what I take to be opening this path of discovery that we can go along with you. You say, they didn't know who they had.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about that. It'll help us in our conversation. Can you tell us a little bit about what you meant? They didn't know who they had.
You know, I think it is the most profound reality when it comes to just life. Here we are being born in a world, and we are miracles, right? And the way that we know that we are miracles is because each of us were born into the world, and the odds that we would be born were 1 in over 400 million. What that means is that when our mothers and fathers got together, we were one of over 400 million different options. Any one of them could have been chosen, but God chose us. And so therefore, there was a purpose and an intentionality in regards to that. And because we were born on purpose, then we have to know we have a purpose. The thing about life is that Black and brown bodies who have been pushed to the margins of society have been told often, over and over and over again by the system, that you're not worth nothing.
Mm.
And the worst part about it is that if we begin to believe that, we then begin to move in our lives as if we are mistakes, when the absolute antithesis of that is true, that we are worth everything. As a matter of fact, we are the future movers and shakers of tomorrow. And once we believe that, what happens is that psychosocially, we begin to matter, right? We begin to turn our light up. We begin to vibrate at higher levels. We begin to eschew the darkness around us by the light that we are exuding from ourselves. And so they didn't know who they had was a statement that not only applied to them, but also to me.
Mm.
I needed to know whose I was,
Mm.
where I was, why I was, how I was. And I feel like I'm missing one of the four W's, but you get it, right?
Where?
Yeah, who, what, where, why, how.
That's
and
right.
Right.
That's right.
You get it, right? That, back in the days, we used to say this statement. We said, "Do the knowledge," right? And it was about sparking the intellect, causing you to think deeply and widely and profoundly about circumstances. And I'm saying this because here I was talking and being in circles where people were pontificating these kinds of ideas, and this was prior to getting locked up at the age of 15.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know who they had. And they most certainly didn't know who they had, because in the Black and brown communities throughout America and perhaps throughout the world, when they say that we have a suspect and that suspect is a person of color, even though in America they say you are innocent until proven guilty, you are seen as guilty,
Absolutely.
judged by the color of your skin and not the content of your character, as opposed to seen as innocent until proven guilty. I remember when we got arrested, Mayor Koch at the time, he said, the criminal justice, people in New York want to see what the criminal justice system is like. They will get the opportunity to see that very thing with this case.
Right.
Imagine that. Donald Trump, 2 weeks into our accusation, he had already created, prepared, paid for, and delivered full-page ads that ran in New York City's newspapers calling for the death penalty specifically for our case. They published our names, phone numbers, and addresses in New York City's newspapers. They were creating a fire, right? They were creating a fire, and we became the modern-day Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I mean, think about that. 13 years later, we come out of the fire not even smelling like smoke.
Come on.
I mean, it's a beautiful story, right? I mean, when you look at it from a different angle, you really begin to be overawed by it.
Mm-hmm.
This story that is now known as the Central Park Jogger case, and the individuals involved, myself included, is one of the most profound things for myself that kind of points the way, tells people how it's possible to fall on your face and still get up. To
This is
lemons in life and make some lemonade.
Oh, this is powerful. This is powerful, as you know. You do this really important work throughout the book, but certainly in the early chapters, work that we'll come back to, because this was the work that sustained you, I believe, that led to your liberation. In this case, I'm talking about your spiritual liberation, your emotional liberation that you drew from until you were liberated physically, materially.
Yeah.
But you're drawing from a deep well here. You're drawing from a deep well here, and that well was really, though you didn't know who you were, say, in this way that you've talked about so profoundly, there was still a deep well there. Yeah. You drew from who you were and who you knew yourself to be, even as a child, I feel like. I mean, the Yusef from before times, the Dr. Salaam before he was Dr. Salaam, was an artist. You went to the LaGuardia High School for the Performing Arts. You were a rapper, rapped as a child, right?
Yes,
you were
sir.
and are a poet. Can you
Yes,
talk
sir.
to me about what life was like for you before the actual trial of the century at 15 years old?
So I gotta preclude my statements with what Dr. John Henrik Clarke said. And Dr. John Henrik Clarke said, if you begin a people's history with slavery, everything else looks like progress. This deep well that you talk about is only something that can be attained by going into sacred memory. That sacred memory that's part of our mtDNA, the mitochondrial DNA, right? And so what I wanted to say in terms of your question is that I was full of hope. I was full of ideas, aspirations. I was full of the American dream.
Mm, mm,
And then I was awakened violently to the American nightmare.
mm.
That nightmare that Malcolm X, my hero, said that the police will come and bust you in your mouth and then charge you with assault. These are things that we see today. These are things that if, Malcolm X and some of the greats that we know about, and most certainly people that we have not even heard of, if they were transposed right into today's society, what they were saying and what they have been saying would be right on cue to respond to the atrocities, the human rights atrocities that we've been experiencing. And I think it's important for story to begin with, especially when you see people on the media, right? We see people like, George Floyd being murdered. And instead of them humanizing him in the way that we know we all are, showing photographs of family members and loved ones and children, they talk about the bad side. And so it's the criminalization of that person. It's the same thing that happened with the then known Central Park Five, right? You got to remember, we were slammed with a tsunami of media. Over 400 articles were written within the first few weeks of our case. No one came and asked us anything. And so I just want you to understand the articles that people read, the vile language that was created, the definition that was given to those individuals, to that family who raised them. No one asked the family, no one asked the individual. You would have found out that my mother was a professor at Parsons University. You would have found out that she tailored suits for Billy D. Williams. You would have found out that I was an artist and still am an artist, that I was full of aspirations and dreams and hopes. And more importantly, what I discovered was that even though the system tries to dim the light of all of us, hey, listen, tone it down. Don't be so boisterous. And I'm not even talking about the rude side of that. I'm talking about the natural, life-given talent, right? Don't 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 show that. Don't just just don't make people uncomfortable. You're using language and ideas and concepts. No, we need to raise everyone to the level so that their vibrations will be able to vibrate higher as well. So that the ideas that I was able to understand that captured me in a historical moment that was connected to the past in a profound way, so that my story was not just a story of Yusef Salaam, this individual anomaly going through this crisis, right? No, my story became systemic. This is the issue. This is why young people, when George Floyd was murdered, the clarion call was echoed. People like myself who were saying that, we need to reform the system. We have a system that's broken. Our ancestors' wildest dreams poured out into the street, and what did they say? They said the system is alive and sick. The system is operating exactly as it was imagined in the minds of the founding fathers. That when we read We the People in the Constitution of the United States, we need transformation to include the kaleidoscope of the human family of the people today. Because when they said we the people, black and brown bodies were still considered 3/5 of human beings.
So Dr. Salaam, that is powerful. And you do this throughout the book. You connect us. You connect us to the Black experience. You connect us to the American experience. You connect us to our dreadful history, but you also connect us to a powerful social history. You mentioned your mother was a professor at Parsons. You mentioned that she tailored suits for Billy D. Williams. Can we spend a little time with your mother? Can you talk about her trip, her coming up? Can you talk about where she came from, her coming up to New York City, making a place for herself? Can we talk about that?
Hey, she used to tell me she was raised in the Jim Crow South, right? My mother was born in Birmingham, Alabama. And for me, and for the stories that we heard about slavery and lynchings and things like that, we didn't see that kind of stuff in New York. And so we felt like, it's the same idea that we've all had, and the feeling that we've all had when, as young people, we're told about things like slavery, right? Oh man, why are you talking about that? That was so long ago. No, that was just yesterday.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, if you have your eyes open, you realize that there's a thing called the modern day cotton field called the prison industrial complex of America that is allowed to exist linguistically because of the 13th Amendment. And that part 2 of the 13th Amendment, section 2, says that Congress, if I'm not mistaken, has the right and the power to enforce the laws and to be able to make it so. And so I'm saying that what we don't see as we uncover it all, that my mother was trying to get me to understand, teaching me that she was raised in the Jim Crow South at the same time as she was playing French records. We would get up and we would hear mommy, un, deux, trois, quatre, cinq, sept, huit. And it's funny because today, because of my physical appearance, I never forget. I used to walk on 125th Street quite often. That was the crossroads of America, still is, and it was definitely my backyard. And the natives from Africa, if they saw me, they would say, "Ça va?" And I would say, "Ça va bien." And they would keep on going. It's like, no, that's all I know. I don't know any more than that. Or they would say "Nanga def," and I would say "Magnifique." And then they would keep on going, and I would have to do the same thing. I don't know. That's all I know. But I'm saying that because in America, there's an interesting dynamic that goes on, a disassociation that is it is like a desire to not be who you are. Dr. James Baldwin said to be African American is to be African without memory and to be American without privilege. And so when I was growing up, and many of the young people that were having this experience, we can go back and we can attest to this. We did not want to be associated with anything African. If somebody said, "Man, you African." No, I'm not. I'm Jamaican. Nah, man, I'm Haitian. And then we get an understanding as we grow up. Why is it that history is taught the way it's taught? And people know, and I'm saying we know, right? And it's a beautiful thing, the spirit and the soul of Black folk. We never have asked for revenge. All we've asked for is equality. All we've asked for is the boots, right? Dr. King said, they tell you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's cruel to say to a bootless man. All we're asking for is the boots. All we're asking for is the education to learn how to fish so that we can have food for the rest of our lives. I'm saying all of this, but you're listening to my mother, right? You're listening to my mother's wisdom that was poured into me. You're listening to my mother's ideas and conversations that I am still digesting. Because these are things that, as I look at growing up and we would talk about health. Well, we wouldn't really talk about health. We were involved in health. My mother raised us as vegans. And due to peer pressure, the vegan lifestyle began to slowly fade away because instead of me eating Snickers and Twix and all kinds of other stuff, Whoppers. What else do they have? Boston baked beans, lemon heads, uh, penny candies. I mean, shoot, if you had 25 cent when you was a child,
Absolutely.
and you could come back with a bag full of candy.
Come on.
Now you might not even get a piece.
Come on.
But it because of peer pressure, I would come outside, and when it would be snack time, I would have alfalfa in a bag.
Mm-hmm.
I would have carrots in a bag. I would have cucumbers in a bag.
Mm-hmm.
And people would ridicule me. He over there eating grass. And I didn't want to be ridiculed. But imagine if the community supported that.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if holistically we were whole.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of in the black and brown communities, there'd be fast food restaurants on every corner, liquor stores every 3 blocks. There's churches there, yes, because people have to atone for their sins. But in the community, you are placing the tools of sin. And I'm not getting at folks that sip a little bit, smoke a little bit. I'm just saying that when, on another note, when there was a problem in the black and brown community, and that problem was drugs, instead of the system responding in the way that the system today has responded,
Right.
where today they say we have an opioid epidemic. We need to open up the Betty Ford clinics of the world.
Right.
Yesterday, they said we need a war on drugs.
Right.
People
That's right.
got football numbers. Many lost their lives in prison.
That's right. That's right. Well, there was a war on drugs. There was a war on you.
Yeah.
It was us.
And I'm saying that that's not disconnected.
That's right.
That right there is it is the thing that morphs in front of us. It is the thing where someone's saying, "No, I'm not. I'm not doing that to you."
Yeah.
When you are.
Yeah. Yeah. And your mother was giving you strategies to resist. In fact, she said those words to you. She said they're playing a game with you. She said the words resist.
Yeah.
That was powerful. That was powerful. It kicked me in the chest when I read it. I also want to ask you a little bit about your father, though the time was brief. But the impact seemed to be very, very, very important. I'd like to hear a little bit about your father, and I'd like to hear about your sister and your brother,
Yeah.
your family and family life.
I got to tell you, interestingly, I never felt the lack of having no father in the home. Right, my father hadn't been there. My mother and father, I think they got divorced either when I turned 4 or shortly thereafter. I had never seen my father after that, and he passed away in 2015.
Yeah.
But what he left us was the spirituality and the connection to the source. And I never forgot that. As a matter of fact, as I grew up and I was able to understand what it was, I was able to then plug right into the source and be able to attach myself to all power because of that, right? In as a Muslim, at least 5 times a day, we have to say these words. We have to say, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, master of the day of judgment, the most gracious, the most merciful. All praise belongs to God, the Lord of all the worlds, master of the day of judgment. You alone do we worship. Not, you know what, I'm going to go see if I could get some money to petition the courts and figure out whose palms I need to greet. I mean, this is the way of the world, right? We figure that we have to, pay Peter to do this and that and so forth and so on. But you're saying you alone do we worship and you alone do we ask for help. And the overall thing, which is really cool, is that you're saying, show us the straight path. What path? The path of those that you have blessed, not the path of those who you're angry with, nor of those who have gone astray. You have to say this. Your prayer is not accepted unless you say this, right? And so what I'm saying is that my father left that with us.
Right.
And when I was in prison, I was able to utilize prayer. I was able, I've read so many things about prayer and the Black experience that's really cool, but I've been able to, so to speak, Islamicize it. And so I forget the exact quote, but it was a saying that, nothing happened when I prayed until I started praying with my feet. Right. And so with me, in hearing that, I realized that I had to pray. And I found out that prayer was you talking to God. And I also had to meditate, because I found out that when you sat down and you quieted yourself and you were still long enough, you could hear God talking back to you. You could find the way out of no way. But it was because you activated the process. And the cool thing about it is that when I came home from prison, now my mother, my brother, my sister, they were going through the prison with me. They were in there. They were going through the ups and downs, right? There's photos in the book that you see my family there. But my mother instilled in my brother and my sister to keep on moving forward. She gave them the understanding that they needed to make something of themselves. And so my sister graduated from college with a college degree. My sister graduated from Stony Brook. My brother graduated from the University of Michigan with, I believe, 2 or 3 degrees at the same time, and it was so beautiful to have that example, because to see that in my brother and my sister was to let me know that I could. And so in I was going to say in school, the school of hard knocks, in prison, I got a college degree, right? I was able to get myself educated. I was able to get my GED in the same time that I would have graduated from high school, and then go right into college and get my college degree. And so education never stopped. And so that was kind of what we've been told and taught as children, right? Over and above, we needed to know what was the truth in order for us to move correctly in society. And we needed to know what it was that they were trying to tell us.
I want to take us to a different place. This is a beautiful and powerful place. And the important part of the story, this is the pre-story. It allows us to understand a little more about you and the man that you become, the man, the boy that you were, and the man that you become.
Mm-hmm.
And it's powerful and it's important. But the adversity, of course, comes. And here you are, still a boy, 15. And you're facing the man who would be president, who would have guessed that, who takes out this $80,000 ad against you. And these other boys, only one of whom you knew, only Corey.
Yeah.
You knew of Antron. You did not know Kevin or Raymond. And here you are facing time for a crime you didn't commit. This is the part that we know. And you say something powerful about this experience. You go through life, you do nearly 7 years. And you describe every experience that you've had as God ordained. And this is why understanding this deep well is important, at least has been for me. It's very important for me in this conversation. I'm gaining so much from this, and I gained so much from the book. I'm reminded of something, the executive director of an organization that worked with formerly incarcerated people once told me, my research has been with formerly incarcerated people over the years. And he said that every interaction is an opportunity for an encounter with the divine. I will never forget that. And he approached his work in that way. His name was Bob Doherty. He's a wonderful man who runs an organization, or ran an organization for years on the west side of Chicago. Every interaction allowed you to live with greater purpose, to find greater and deeper purpose. And there's this passage in the book where you say, the Central Park jogger case is actually a love story between God and his people about a system of injustice placed on trial itself, then toppled in order to produce what amounts to a miracle in modern time.
Yes, indeed.
The tragedy came, but this perspective, how did you go through this tragedy with such perspective? And can you talk about how you could possibly talk about something like this as a gift from God to us, not just to you, right? You make this a love story for us. I'd love for you to talk about this.
I got to tell you, right? It's one thing to be going through something, and it's a completely different thing when you grow through something. You can have a testimony because you've been tested, right? If you didn't be tested or you weren't tested, you wouldn't have the testimony. You couldn't testify. And I'm using this kind of concepts because what happens in life quite often is when you're going through the trauma or the trouble or the struggle or whatever it is, it's rough, it's tough, but it's life trying to create a survivor.
Yeah.
And you don't know this yet, right? I lived on the 6th floor on 138th Street in Harlem, right off of Malcolm X Boulevard, for years. I looked at that house, that apartment, I called it a house. And I said, I was living in the penthouse. It just didn't have an elevator. Now, if I left something upstairs on my way to work, I didn't want to go back up them steps. But man, you talking about being thankful that you even have a home, being thankful that you even have a place after being run over by the spike wheels of justice, people finding grace and mercy to say to you, I know a place for you. I got a place for you. It's a little bit of a struggle, but I got you. And it's not bad in terms of payment. I could afford it, you know? You really do not see God carrying you in the same way that you read the poem Footprints until you ask and you look back. See, what we know is this. We know that man makes plans. And quite often those plans can be very evil. As a matter of fact, if you think about the worst atrocities that you've ever heard about in history, I mean, things like King Leopold, right? Things like Hitler, you know, things like what created the Third Reich, right? You got to understand that historically things were going on and multiplying. But when God plans, God's plan is, I can't even like fully espouse the beauty of it, because it's not until you look back that you see it. I mean, here it is. I'm 15. Some of my comrades are 14. Corey is 16. These are 5 ingredients, if you can think about it that way. The most important ingredient is not even a suspect. Raymond and Kevin get arrested the night that this so-called incident happened. There's no evidence that they were even around a rape, let alone a violent rape. Myself, Corey, and Antron, we get arrested the next day. If you've seen When They See Us, you see how Antron got arrested. They came to his house, told him to get his clothes, the same clothes he was wearing that night. They were trying to connect them and connect us to this horror. But Kevin and Raymond were arrested the night that this happened. So then I come and there was some creative license with regards to When They See Us. And it was a beautiful thing because what I knew about the way Ava DuVernay knew our story, she knew that it was the most dangerous thing to be a young person of color in Harlem at that particular point in time. We all described there was no young people on the streets. They had arrested everybody. They took every single person off the street. But when they came to get me, they were standing in front of my door on on the 21st floor. They were talking to my brother. They were trying to get my brother to throw some clothes on and come downtown with them. He'd be right back. We turn the corner and they see me. I'm 6 foot tall, maybe 6'3", 6'1", 6'3" at the time, 6'2" at the time. And they said to me, "Who are you?" I got a triple fat goose on with the fur on the collar, long trench coat, the only kind of coat that fits a tall man. And I said, "I'm Yusef Salaam." They said, "Oh, this is one of the guys we were looking for." They looked at Corey and said, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm Corey Wise." They said, you're not on the list, but do you want to go downtown with your buddy? You'll be right back. I mean, I got to get you to understand what's happening here. The worst horror, the worst nightmare is about to be heaped upon Corey Wise. All of us are going through a horror, but we don't know yet. We don't know that each of us had different levels of horror that we went through. I come home from prison. It's rough. It's tough. Everything that you can imagine. Oh, it's prayer time. Hold on for 1 second. Everything that you can imagine is being presented, trying to happen to me. But I'm protected by the hedge of God. Corey is going from Rikers Island to Attica. Now, the names of those prisons alone should be enough to shake anyone, because Rikers Island is world known.
Right.
Attica is world known, right? He is going through not just hell. The type of hell he's going through is indescribable. And if you've seen When They See Us, there's a scene in the film where they come to his cell. He's about to go to parole. And he is asked by the officer to throw some clothes on, get himself together. And he said, "Where are we going?" Officer says, "You're going to the parole hearing." He said, "Oh, I'm not going." Now, Corey could have gone, and he could have said, "Man, this is hell. Let me just lie. Let me just tell them that I did it so I can get out of this hell and go home." But he said, "No, I'm not going." He said, "You're not going?" He said, "If they don't want to hear my truth, I don't want to waste my time." They hit him with another 2 years. He has a 5 to 15 year sentence. And that 5 to 15 year sentence is quickly turning into a life sentence because of some of the horrors that were happening in New York and the way that the governor was changing the laws, leaving it up to the parole board to parole people or not. Mm-hmm. Corey then makes a silent prayer. He basically is told by another inmate, "Listen, why don't you just put in a petition to go see if you can get closer to your home. See if you can get closer so your mama could come and see you." He knew that he hadn't had any family coming to see him. That does something to you. So he makes this silent prayer. He talks to God and says, "Man, I done used all my bad luck up. It can't get no worse than this." Instead of him going closer to home, God stretches him further than he's ever gone. He goes to a place where the real perpetrator is, and the real perpetrator sees him for the first time. He saw him before, but now he really sees him. He says, "Wow, you still here?" Unbeknownst to Corey, this young man who had done all of these atrocities, who raped the Central Park jogger, who was known as the East Side rapist and East Side slasher, he had been trying to atone for the crimes and the sins and the punishments. He sees Corey, and it's almost as if God said, "I have one last thing for you to do. You got to tell the truth about this young man." Corey could have folded. Corey could have been murdered in prison. But Corey had the stick-to-itiveness. He had the strength. He was built differently. The guy sees him and says, "I got to tell the truth." He tells the truth, and Corey is freed. Because Corey is the magic ingredient of the 5, he then frees us all. Now, mind you, we were already free, right? The only person that had mistakenly gone back to prison was Raymond Santana, because we understand what happened with regards to that. They make life hard for you. If you happen to survive in prison, then we most certainly will try to make sure you have a social death, so every single door of success would be shut in your face. And so he said, "Man, this is crazy." It was crazy for all of us. Right. But he chose to sell drugs, and he went to prison again. And he was able to be released from that because of Corey. This is a love story. This is a beautiful story. And not only that, thank God I don't look like what I've been through. Because God has used us in such a way that they created this platform. They had these nooses hanging from the ledge.
Mm,
And then the nooses went away, but the platform remained.
mm.
And here we are able to talk about the situation. Dr. James Baldwin said, the victim who is able to articulate himself ceases to become the victim, but they are now the threat. We are teaching people to stand up for themselves. We are telling them to turn up their light so that the darkness around them can be eradicated. Telling people that you too have a purpose. We all do.
I want to return. This is powerful. I want to take us to you discovering who you are. And there's this beautiful passage where you discover your name. There's a book of names that you receive, and it tells you what the names mean, and you learn about your name. You learn about what it means to be Yusef.
Yes.
Yusef in the Quran, Joseph in the Bible.
Yes.
And the moment you discover this story, shortly thereafter, you write a wonderful poem. And this is a poem that you wrote as a child. And it's on page 50. And I wonder if you would read that poem and talk about the importance of this moment, you discovering who you are.
Yes, absolutely. Let me set it up a bit.
Please.
And about a little while into my prison bid, this is I'm reading from my book of poetry, and a lot of my poems are inside of the book. This officer walks up to me and he asks me a question, and the question seems like it's a very simple question. He says, "Hey, who are you?" And I said, I'm Yusef Salaam, one of the guys that they accused of raping the Central Park jogger, but I didn't do it." And to my surprise, he says, "I know that." Now, this is an officer. He says, "I know that." He said, "I've been watching you. You're not supposed to be here. Why are you here? Who are you?" I realized that I didn't know. And so in my book of poetry, I wrote very succinctly, searching to find who has come, a beautiful soul, a powerful one. Here I am in prison. And this story, I'm going to start with, I'm going to start with the more than 40 years ago. More than 40 years ago, my parents observed me for 7 days and gave me a name that divinely aligned with my journey. As I read the story of Yusuf alayhi salam in the Quran and Joseph in the Bible, I received spiritual nourishment. Over and over, I said, wow, Allah is talking to me. I appreciated that divine nod. I don't believe myself to be a modern day Yusuf, peace be upon him. But reading those stories and connecting them to my own helped me realize that Allah's miracles have not stopped. Sitting in my jail cell at 16 years old, I learned that I was a miracle waiting to happen. The uncovering of who I was required me to use my choices to participate in that miracle in a meaningful way. Every day I had a chance to push that miracle forward into fruition. I also somehow understood that even when names are forgotten, the justice and reality of God, Allah, remains. The time I spent unpacking my first name was also the first time I said to myself, this is Allah's doing. Allah is allowing this to become a beautiful story, as opposed to the tragedy some people intended. It wasn't long after reading these sacred texts that I wrote the following poem. In between Venus and Mars is the center of our attraction. Of those connected to the stars, hardly a fraction. It behooves man to work for the day when this will all end. Life is mortal, so follow the way of those heaven sent. Awaken and receive that which will give you life, or remain horizontal and never begin the flight. For the solution, I'll descend from amongst the stars, and I'll meet you in between Venus and Mars. I got to tell you, the way that that poem came to me, it was almost as if I was the vessel that God placed it in. I remember walking down the corridor, and all of a sudden I had this overwhelming need to write. And I asked somebody to give me a napkin. And I wrote on the napkin with my pencil those words, never revised it. It came out exactly that way, and that's how it stayed. But it was the understanding of my name in prison, right? I knew my mother named me Yusef Idris Fadil Abdus Salam, but if somebody asked me what it meant, I couldn't tell you. As a matter of fact, most people, when they asked me what was my name and I said Yusef, they sometimes would say Joseph. And I would say, no, Yusef. And sometimes they would say Joseph. And then sometimes I would say, no, Yusef. You know that thing that people do with NLP, shake their head to try to get you to agree with their pronunciation? And sometimes people would slow it down because it was almost as if you were trying to slow it down, as if people had a speech impediment that disallowed them to say ethnic sounding names. And they would slow themselves down and they would say, Joseph, almost letting me know, I know who you are. You don't know who you are. Joseph is the English equivalent to the Arabic word Yusuf, but the meaning is what's important. I found out that Yusuf means God will increase. I found out that Idris means the teacher, that Fa'adil is with justice, and Abdus Salam is this servant of the owner of peace. So imagine me finding out in prison for the first time that my parents named me on the 7th day of my birth. God will increase the teacher with justice and peace. That blew my mind.
Powerful.
That
Powerful.
blew my mind. And it gave me an overwhelming sense of, man, okay, I could keep on moving forward. Okay, I'm ready for the next round.
You're right. In fact, not far from there on the very next page, I was this person before I even had a tangible hold on what it meant to be that person.
Yes, yes.
It's striking to me what your parents were up to. And it's striking to me, there's a passage in the book where you talk about your grandmother who was urging you, straighten your back in her way.
Yeah.
And this leads you to the outside. This is the deep well of strength that we were talking about, that allowed you. It was the thing that you drew from that allowed you to sustain it until you were set free. You couldn't know that the magic ingredient would set you free.
No.
You say something when you're home that's powerful to me. All of this knowledge doesn't come without adversity. There's the obvious adversity of the prison and the prison experience and the wrongful conviction. There's the celebration of the exoneration. But you said that you didn't really feel celebrated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Until really the 2012 documentary, and then the 2019, of course, Ava DuVernay.
Yeah.
When they see us. Can you talk about what it was like to come home and what it was like even after exoneration, even after this moment that made it so?
Yeah.
Even having all this deep knowledge yourself, you still didn't yet feel celebrated in the way that perhaps you deserve.
Yeah, I mean, I was piecing my life back together, most certainly. But one of the things that was really happening was that when you look at the way we were introduced to the world, those over 400 articles being written about us, that tsunami tearing apart our lives, when you look at that introduction juxtaposed to the fact that we were innocent,
That's right.
it was a blip, it was a whisper. My mother described it in a beautiful way when she was testifying at City Hall in New York. She said it was a whisper. She wondered if the rats in New York City even heard. It got little to no attention.
That's right.
It was one of those things where people said, oh, my bad. But the truth of the matter was that you didn't just hurt me. You hurt families, You hurt communities. You were pulling at the fabric of the fiber of community and leaving gaping holes. And so coming home to anything less than fanfare
Right.
was a disservice. Because when we exited life and we were lodged in the womb of America, the belly of the beast, when we returned, we had thought we had all of the tools that we needed, right? We thought we had the education. We thought we had the mindset. But then we were faced with the social death that was waiting for us.
Right.
We were faced with the opportunity that wasn't there. We were faced with us having to go back and strengthen ourselves even more because we were going to be made into diamonds. And diamonds aren't diamonds yet until they get cut. Tremendous pressure is placed upon them. And so I was walking around with my head down inside. I didn't want to be known as one of the Exonerated Five, the Central Park Five. I didn't even want to be known. I wanted to be hiding in plain sight until I finally began to participate in some liberating theology. I remember becoming a part of campaigns to end the death penalty. I think they had the parent chapters in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. And you know, we were trying to make sure we canceled the death penalty in New York, and we won, and we got it canceled. And then we were looking at cases like Troy Davis, Rodney Reed, all of these cases where we were trying to ensure that these individuals who there was questions about their guilt were at least looked at again to get off of death row, you know. And I found out that I had a voice. I found out that as I stood up, people began to become encouraged by what I was saying. I found out that the words that I heard Dr. Maya Angelou say was true. She said, you should be angry, but you must not be bitter. She said, bitterness is like a cancer. It eats upon the host. It doesn't do anything to the object of its displeasure. So use that anger, she says. And this is the alchemy. She said, you dance it, you march it, you vote it. You do everything about it, she said. And then she said, you talk it. Never stop talking it. And so it was me finding out that part of my purpose was not just to be a motivational speaker, but I needed to be an inspirational / transformational speaker. I needed to utilize my story in order to tell other people that they too can go free. That if you find yourself in a prison anywhere out of society or inside of the world, you too can get out of that. Wherever your mind goes, your body follows. Raise your vibrations higher and higher and higher so that the light that you have inside of you will begin to illuminate not only the darkness inside of your own self, but most certainly the darkness around you. And I tell you, it was a challenge, but at the same time, my mother, my sister, my brother, they gently were there to ensure that if I needed an opportunity to just sit in the dark, they didn't question that. If I needed to lean on them, they didn't question that. They were there making sure that I didn't fall again. And most importantly, they were there to make sure that when it was time for me to stand on my own, I was able to. Yeah.
And later, your wife, your children. Beautiful. My time with
Okay.
Dr. Salaam has come to an end. But let me just say that get this book. Get this book. A powerful book.
Better Not Bitter. Living on Purpose in the Pursuit of Racial Justice. Oh, by the way, this is my mugshot. I don't know if folks know that. This is the side profile when they tell you to stand straight. Okay, turn to the side. That's this photo right here. Oh, man. Yeah.
This has been a fascinating conversation. I know that people are just so drawn into the story. Dr. Salaam, it's just been riveting listening to you. I know I speak for many on the Zoom when I say that. I'm going to just offer one question. We're at 7:56. My guess is we'll probably get one solid question in before we end at 8. a reminder to folks, we are going to do an after hours that will begin. There'll be a 5-minute break for these two gentlemen. In between, we'll open up the room at about 8:05. Please help support Dr. Salaam and his work. Buy a book. We've put links in here. Get a book. You'll get a link to come to after hours and be able to just learn more from these two brilliant gentlemen. So with that commercial firmly in place, we'll put in this question here to Dr. Salaam. Heather asks, what do you think is currently the greatest impediment to meaningful and lasting criminal justice reform in this country? And what role, I guess it's a twofer, and what role do you see community activists, elected officials, and police departments playing in a solution? My guess is I'm not sure you're going to get, maybe take the first question. I don't know if 3 minutes is going to work for you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, oh man. Okay, I'm gonna see if I could. I'm gonna see if I could bring it all together.
Okay.
Perhaps I might be able to bring it together. What role? What role? So, I'll start with this. We are the future. We were screening the documentary, The Central Park Five in California. I think we were at USC, if I'm not mistaken. And we were screening the documentary. And this was early in my speaking career. A young girl stands up, she's in the audience, and she says, Yusef, I have a question. I know we're going to have a Q&A, but I have this burning question. She said, I'm 13 years old. I'm a cadet. I want to become a cop. What advice can you give me? And I said, ooh. My mind, the first thought that came to my mind was run. Tell her to run. Tell her not to become a cop. Go into any other profession than that. Become a brain surgeon. And then something miraculous happened. I realized, because I paused for a moment to think, I realized that I was talking to the future. This was a rare moment. This was a rare opportunity that I had. I was talking to the future, and the future was asking me, what advice can I give them to be their best self? They found their purpose, the purpose that Dr. King would say, when you find your purpose in life, do it as if God himself called you to do it at this very moment. And instead of giving us a grand idea of what purpose could be, Dr. King said, if your purpose in life is to become a street sweeper, sweep the streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep the streets like Beethoven composed music, like Leoton Price sang before the opera. Here it was, this young child in front of me found purpose. And I began to tell her about what I've seen in my travels throughout the nation, that on every cop car, there are the words in some variation to serve and protect. That on the side of cop cars in New York, they go a step beyond that. They add courtesy, professionalism, and respect. I said to her that my advice is that she do her job. What I knew at that point was that there were far more good cops than there were bad cops. But bad policing always gets the light shown on them. We never hear about the good police officers that are out there. But more importantly, we need those good officers to stand up and stand in between the atrocities that are going down, that they sometimes have to turn their backs to, that sometimes they have to say, I can't witness this, I'm out of here. We need you to do more. And so my advice to her, for her to do her job, I'm hoping that she became one of the best shining officers to this day. I'm hoping she found that beauty in that profession, because it's important. We are the future. We are literally the ones who are going to be the movers and shakers of tomorrow. And I'm trying to remember the first part of the question.
How about we save it for after hours? We're at 8:00 now, and my guess is it'll give us a nice place to start for after hours. So
Sure,
why don't we do that? That sounds like a good idea. And you two gentlemen can have a nice break for about 5 minutes, and we'll see you in just a few minutes. So everyone, I want to thank you so much for coming tonight. Hope to see you next Tuesday for our next event. Thank you so much, Professor Miller, Dr. Salaam. Beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for your service to FAN. We appreciate it.